This presentation will cover GeneConvene itself, what it is, why it is needed, our scope and goal, what we do to achieve our goal, and how we do our work, in particular with partners. Other presentations cover why new tools for malaria are needed, and what GeneDrive is, what its potential applications are, and particularly the promise of GeneDrive approaches for malaria. They also cover more specifics about the pathway for developing GeneDrive approaches. GeneConvene is a program of FNIH. It is the largest of several infectious disease programs that FNIH manages. It is the only one of those programs focused on the complete development pathway of a new intervention. As covered in another presentation, GeneConvene continues a 15-year history of FNIH's involvement in innovative vector control approaches, including GeneDrive. GeneConvene is funded by a 4-year, $23 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that began at the start of this year. Currently, the Gates Foundation is the only funder of GeneConvene, but FNIH's work on vector control has in the past also been funded by Open Philanthropy and Wellcome. We are working now to broaden the funding base for GeneConvene. The GeneConvene team, shown on this slide, includes staff at FNIH and 2 additional full-time members from Western Michigan University and EHS Consulting in Nairobi. Our team has a range of expertise to support our work, including vector biology and genetics, regulatory science for genetically modified organisms, partner engagement, project management, and scientific program leadership. GeneConvene also funds administrative, meeting and events, communications, fundraising, and grants and contracts management support from FNIH. There are 3 key realities that motivate the need for GeneConvene. First, GeneDrive approaches have tremendous potential to prevent malaria transmission. Second, scientific and technical progress on GeneDrive approaches has accelerated in the past 5 years after CRISPR-Cas tools began to be applied to GeneDrive. Third, no GeneDrive approach has been implemented yet, so there is a gap in experience of how to get from the current scientific progress to impact on the global burden of malaria. There are multiple different research groups investigating GeneDrive approaches for preventing malaria transmission in Africa, and there could be more in the future. Although the technical approaches differ in detail, many of the steps from lab to impact are the same, so it makes sense to have a technology-agnostic organization supporting the development pathway. That is the role that GeneConvene plays. GeneConvene was formed with the scope of genetic biocontrol technologies for public health. Within that scope, our current grant funds our focus on GeneDrive approaches for malaria in Africa. Our goal is to support informed and responsible decision-making on genetic biocontrol approaches for public health. We believe that decisions about the potential role of GeneDrive approaches in malaria control and elimination are optimized when researchers understand best practices for product development and decision makers and the public have access to accurate information about the technology. We do not advocate for specific decisions by developers, regulators, policymakers, or publics. Our role is to support decision makers with information and to advocate for responsible decision-making processes. What GeneConvene does falls into 3 broad categories. The first category is identifying and addressing key questions. Given that no GeneDrive approach has been implemented yet, there are many questions about how GeneDrive approaches can be developed and evaluated. These include scientific and technical questions, like appropriate guidelines for laboratory containment and how field trials should be designed and carried out. Regulatory questions, like how national, regional, and global laws and treaties apply to GeneDrive approaches. And stakeholder engagement questions, like how to involve communities in decision-making. GeneConvene looks ahead on the development pathway and identifies the key questions and challenges, then proactively works with international experts to identify answers and solutions. The second category is providing technical advice. We use our expertise and partnerships to provide technical advice on a range of scientific, regulatory, and policy issues relevant to genetic biocontrol technologies. For example, we have analyzed the legislation and policies governing gene drive approaches in countries in Africa. We have also facilitated independent hazard analyses and risk assessments to complement risk analyses conducted by developers and regulatory authorities. The third category is strengthening capacity and sharing information. Part of our role in supporting informed and responsible decision-making is providing technical training and information to scientists, regulators, policymakers, and other stakeholders and publics. We also facilitate communication within and among stakeholder groups, and in particular serve as the Secretariat for the Gene Drive Research Forum, which brings together representatives from research, government, private sector, and not-for-profit organizations with an interest in safe and ethical conduct of gene drive research. First and foremost, all of the work of GeneConvene is done in partnership with stakeholders. The constellation of partners that we work with will be discussed in greater detail on the next slide. We've highlighted some of the ways that we do our work here. It is important for us to listen to our partners and hear the challenges encountered by developers and decision makers. This helps us assess the key questions that need to be addressed in areas where we can provide technical advice, strengthen capacity, and share information. Given our name, it should be no surprise that a fundamental approach for GeneConvene is to convene experts to address key questions that we have identified, typically with partners, and often in a series of workshops or trainings. Part of our role is then to facilitate input and discussion. In our coordinating role among partners, and especially our role as a neutral convener, we have the opportunity to aggregate data, information, and perspectives about the key questions for the development of gene drive approaches. This positions us to provide analysis, such as consensus best practices, that informs the development and evaluation of gene drive approaches. Ultimately, we have influence through sharing information and advising stakeholders. We aim to publish the results of all of our convenings to make these informative discussions and any resulting recommendations broadly available. A new component of GeneConvene is the Virtual Institute, which aims to expand the reach of our knowledge dissemination. Partnership is essential to the work of GeneConvene. On the left side of this slide, you see some examples of the activities we partner with others on. On the right side of this slide is a long list in tiny font of partners we work with. The goal is only to give you a sense that there are a lot of them, and even this list isn't comprehensive. We partner with individuals and organizations from around the world, academia, foundations, governments, industry, and international organizations. Some of our interactions include formal agreements, such as grants, contracts, MOUs, or confidentiality agreements. The colored boxes indicate which activities we work with them on. With all of our partners, communication among stakeholders is important, and they all have information that represent important sources for the GeneConvene Virtual Institute. One partner is worth particular mention. The African Union Development Agency, NAPAD, is our key partner for work with African country governments, regional economic communities, and the African Union. As you can see from the darkest blue boxes, many of our partners are members of the Gene Drive Research Forum, for which GeneConvene serves as the Secretariat. The forum brings together researchers, sponsors, supporters, and other interested organizations to discuss the current status and path ahead for gene drive research. We hope this has been a helpful overview of the GeneConvene Global Collaborative and look forward to discussing with you soon. Thank you.